Welcome, welcome to Artisan Alternatives for Fair Fashion. We're going to be travelling from Ethiopia via Mexico, India, Malaysia and Germany and back to the Netherlands in our session today. First of all, we're going to go to Ethiopia, where we're going to be visiting the workshop of Sabahar, where we're going to see production in action. Shifro, are you there? And can you tell us what is happening?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to say welcome to Sabahar workshop. I start from our spinner Italema. She's spinning the cotton. So I read the question for Italema. Kate Notamarshid. Okay, she said the spinning she learned from her family. She's working in Sabahar for a long time. Yeah.
Shifro, your video has stopped a minute.
That it's not working.
We can hear the looms working.
Christine, maybe we can go to the next part of the world, but it's such a inspiring
No,
example,
we're not. We're
actually.
going to stay in Ethiopia.
No? Okay.
We're going to stay in Ethiopia and we're going to go over to Hiwot. Hiwot, we're going to see in a minute some of the beautiful clothing that's being made in the studio, and hopefully we're going to see it actually being made as well. But your products are defined by the threads and production they're made. So the threads and raw materials are the first piece in the definition of a product. Is this true of your products? And many smaller scale producers aren't able to achieve the economies of scale used by big fashion houses. How do you compete with this? Hiwot, you need to unmute yourself.
Here I am. Can you hear me now? Yes, we try to make sure that our products show the beauty of natural materials, and that at each of fiber processing, we are able to create employment for artisans. It's true that as a small social producer, our production costs will be higher than for a big fashion house. However, by only working with limited range fibers, we are able to purchase most of our materials in bulk in order to ensure reliable supply, and also to reduce the cost by purchasing directly from producers. We know how our raw materials we produce, and only purchase from companies who take social culture and environmental issues seriously.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And do you think we can get back to the studio now, this workshop? I think we're still frozen. We're still frozen. So we're going to fly on to India, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to Sabahar in a moment. And Indro, you work with the Craft Research Centre in India, and CRC is a 30-year-old WFTO member which focuses on income generation for marginalised artisans all over India, and one of the pioneers eco-friendly and sustainable materials in fashion. So tell us how you at CRC, environmental and sustainable clothing has traditionally had a bad name. What are you going to address this, and what audience are you reaching out to?
Thank you for the question, Christine. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, a very happy World Fair Trade to everyone. So to answer your question, I think I would like to use an example. So the example I am talking about is upcycled stole. So here's the story. A couple of years ago, some artisans we work with in the northwest part of India who are weavers, they came to us with this concept of upcycled stoles. Naturally, we were curious and asked them, well, what's this about? So it turns out a group of very technically advanced weavers were collecting used and leftover clothes from malls, from big stores, from consumers even, and then they were taking those old clothes apart. They were just literally taking it apart and using that with a mix of cotton and coming up with recycled yarn. And with that recycled yarn, they had created a series of really stunning upcycled stoles. Now, the first thing which came to our mind was this is a classic example of a circular economy, and we are all now very bought into this concept of a circular economy. And when we got the samples of these stoles, it was quite amazing. They're very soft. They're beautifully soft. They are cool in summer. They're light. They're warm in winter, and they have this beautiful soft feeling to it. But interestingly, when we offered it to all of our buyers, there was a lot of concern. Why were they concerned? Now, they were concerned because these stoles, if you look at them, if you look at the content, it's 60% cotton and then 40% is recycled fibers. So all of them were concerned that, well, the 40% recycled fibers have things like polyester in them. So, we didn't really get a very good response from any of our buyers, and we were puzzled because what we clearly thought was the next step in sustainable material, sustainable fashion did not come across as that. But then one of our buyers, and all credit to them, they caught on to the story. They understood what we were trying to do. So we discussed with them, and what we realized that, even if you think about the 40% which is recycled fiber, but then if you look at the 60%, right, the 60% which is cotton, what you have at the end of it all is a classic upcycling and circular economy story. So it was really explaining the marketing part of it, right? That of course there's a negative part of it, maybe a small negative part of it, because it does have some polyester and nobody likes polyester. But then the benefit of it, if you look at a country like, say, India, there's millions and millions of tons of used clothing and, leftovers and rejects from consumers which just go to the rubbish dump. And now we have the technology, and all of this is done by power loom, and now we have the technology and the skill. It needs a lot of skill to weave these stoles. Now we have the skill to convert all this waste into something which is really beautiful. And the slide, you could see the pictures. I trust me, if you see these stoles, if you feel them in your hand, you will be amazed at how wonderful and beautiful they are. And we are actually working on a second set of collection for this. So, and once this buyer accepted it, this one particular buyer, then we explained to a lot of other buyers. And now we are seeing a very wide range of acceptance that, hey, this is a market, this is the circular economy example. And what we need to do is position in the market as such. We have to make the consumer aware that this is the key to a sustainable future, and that's how you're going to sell this stole. So, this example was really good, and I wanted to share this with you, that oftentimes, as you said, Christine, that often, sustainable fashion or alternative fashion has a bad rap. And I think one of the keys to this puzzle is, how do you explain the product? How do you market it? What is the USP? What is the unique selling point of this product? And if we can identify that, then we have a definite bright future with sustainable fashion as practiced by, say, fair trade organizations such as us.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And we're going to fly on now. We're going to fly on to Mexico, and in Mexico we're going to talk to Pedro Gamboa, who is from the Haciendas del Mundo Mayo Foundation, which he joined in 2014, working on development, fair trade, and handicraft in Mexico, and is now currently leading the Ensamble Artesano, which we're going to hear some more about, a collective effort of 36 social brands and non-profits working together for restoring the value chains affected by the pandemic in the artisan sector. So Pedro, over there in Mexico, tell us, how important is transparency in the artisanal supply chain? Can you please share with us your practice in the Ensamble Artesano initiative from the workshop to store?
Hello, Christine. Thank you for the question and for this invitation. We are very happy from Haciendas del Mundo Maya Foundation and Ensamble Artesano. Transparency is everything for us. We are committed to shifting the mindset of the stakeholders among the value chain from competition to collaboration. Instead of keeping information hidden in someone's laptop, we need to share it with the final consumers, with the retailers, the wholesalers, designers, and of course, and most important, the producers. We created in Ensamble Artesano an open data platform shared by the 36 organizations participating for traceability of each product, to put a name and a face behind the clothes, to know exactly the who's and the hows of each piece, about how it was made. We know who and how the materials were produced, and fabrics were dyed, and producers know the price, the price market of their pieces. It is a celebration for us of the process and a recognition of the people involved in the making of each piece. Information is power, power to transform our relations, not only the economic relations, and power needs to be shared.
Pedro, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to speak about also about how artisanal production is traditionally seen as a low technology. I want to jump to that other part of the conversation. Is this okay?
Please do.
I think that the label low technology comes from a misunderstanding of the complex processes that are behind artisanal production. The procedure to make a fabric from thread using a waist loom, for example, or a pedal loom is really complex, and it has been refined during thousands of years of human history. It is the same behind the intricate chemistry involving natural dyeing processes, where temperature, salinity, pressure, and many other factors are controlled at the perfection by the artisans. Now, more than ever, artisans in Mexico and around the world, of course, are facing technology challenges, not just in the production processes, but mostly for accessing the market and suppliers in fair conditions. In the Ensamble Artesano initiative, we communicate to plan the production, to develop design processes, and innovative and collaborative networks for supply management all around the country using Zoom calls and WhatsApp groups with the producers every day. Many of these artisans groups are collaborating with universities and design studios for innovation, of course, in their production processes, but it doesn't need to end every time in a 3D printer to be understood as technology. Artisans are using the technology available when it makes sense and where it matters to them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pedro. And I think that point about thousands of years of work in the design history of the artisanal production is so important to be recognised. So thank you, and we're going to fly on now over to Malaysia. We're going to talk to Sasi, who's from Heir in Malaysia. Sasi founded Heir, an award-winning Malaysian ethical lifestyle brand, creating handcrafted heritage pieces made by rural women, refugees, and indigenous people. So if that wasn't enough for any one person in a lifetime, Sasi's also an Eisenhower Fellow, a Vital Voices Fellow, a Warsaw 40 Under 40, and a Tatlo Hero awardee. She's also led Fashion Revolution in Malaysia from 2014 to 2020. So Sasi, I'm going to ask you your question. You have refugees working in your supply chain. Can you tell us how you market your products and some of the challenges and opportunities involved?
Thanks, Christine. So with Heir, I mean, in Malaysia, actually, so refugees are actually not allowed to work in Malaysia. So they don't have a legal right to earn an income. And Christine, you know this very well. So the UN Refugee Agency actually approached us a couple of years ago, and we've actually started making a range of jewelry together with refugees in Malaysia. And the refugees actually come from countries such as Afghanistan, Syria, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, and Myanmar. So this is actually, the beautiful range that we managed to create. So I think in terms of marketing challenges, being part of Made 51 in collaboration with the UN Refugee Agency has been a great help for us. And I think, beyond making jewelry, last year during the pandemic, we actually worked with refugees in making PPE for Malaysian frontliners as well, which was significant because at that point in time, there was actually a lot of xenophobia about refugees and immigrants in the country and about how refugees are spreading the virus and things like that. So, when we actually got media coverage for the fact that refugees were stitching PPE to save the lives of Malaysian, frontliners, it really helped to change the narrative that Malaysians had about refugees in Malaysia. So I think one of the key things that we've learned is definitely about developing partnerships. And we were certified as a fair trade organization in 2019, I believe. And that as well has been a great platform for us because now we don't have to defend ourselves and keep, trying to explain to people about why we're ethical and how we are ethical and, about how we actually run our business. The fact that we are certified independently and audited independently, I think has given consumers a lot of confidence in working with us and buying products from us.
Wonderful, thank you. And beautiful products there, really, really beautiful products. And Sasi, you've also been working with Fashion Revolution in Malaysia. What does this mean in Malaysia?
So when I started Fashion Revolution, when I brought or, contacted Fashion Revolution and I, wanted to start it in Malaysia, at that point in time, this was 2014, awareness of ethical fashion and why sustainability matters was pretty low in Malaysia at that point. And so I was very interested in bringing the movement in to Malaysia to help grow awareness of why we should think about the people that are making the products and the humans and the environmental impacts behind the products that we buy. So it was a lot about encouraging people to be conscious consumers. And so I think the whole fashion revolution, tagline, who made my clothes and who made my fabric this year and who made my, whatever it is that I'm buying, who made it, really has brought a lot of conversation into Malaysia. And I think now, almost 7 years later, there's so many brands now that are talking about ethical fashion and sustainability in Malaysia. So, when we first started, I think I could count the number of brands in one hand. So now there's so many brands talking about this. So I think that has been, a great achievement, I feel. And so I think, it's also to help buyers understand that, we're not a sweatshop country, I guess, when you're able to talk and you're able to bring about these questions to the fore, it actually helps brands and consumers really ask questions and for brands to be more transparent. To be pushed to be more transparent if they weren't already about their supply chain and how they actually make their products.
That's great, and it's great to see that collaboration between the fair trade enterprises in Malaysia and the fashion revolution in Malaysia going forward. So yeah, no, it's all good. Thank you, thank you. I can see can see Sabahar's workshop. Let's go back to Ethiopia and see if we can join Shifuro in the workshop since we have him there. Shifuro, are you there? Wonderful.
Okay.
Shifra, would you like to say some words there? Or should we just watch your weaving?
Okay. Okay. Thank you again. I would like to say, welcome to our Sabahar workshop. Now this is the weaving. The previous one in the spinning what I show. I think there's a problem on the video. Now it's better, huh?
Yes. It's working.
So this is our weaver, Charfo. He is weaving the pillow cover. This is an export standard. Charfo is our weaver. He's working with us for a long time. He learned the weaving from his family, and he's working for a long time. So we are doing from 100% cotton and dyed with different colors, and then we are making a good pillow covers. Yeah. Thank you.
Lovely. And can we see the hand spinning as well?
Okay.
So this is the way that the threads are made that go into the weaving that you're demonstrating there.
Yeah.
I think we've lost you again. Oh no.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're frozen again. But it just to illustrate, so the artisan who is weaving there has come in from the village to demonstrate how the hand spinning is done in the villages, that it goes into the beautiful garments that we saw shown by Hiwot earlier. Yes. So thank you so much, Shifuro. Oh, we can see it now. Yeah, it's the connection is obviously rather difficult, but it's at least we've had a taster of all the work that's going on there, and as it's being multiplied and taken forward in so many of the workshops all over the world that we're talking about today. So I think we're going to have to say goodbye to Ethiopia. Thank you very much, Shifro, and that's a really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Unless
very
you want
much
to add
my
anything
side.
extra, do you want to say anything more from the workshop there?
Okay, thank you for visiting our. Yeah, thank you very much for visiting our workshop. In the future, we'll make it a good video and with a good connection, we'll meet with the World Fair Church. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all the artisans allowing us to see their images to be transferred around the world for everyone to see. Thank you. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, good. So right, so we're now going to fly over to Europe and to the Netherlands, where we're going to speak to Caterina from SeeMe in the Netherlands. Caterina has 20 years of experience in working in corporate social responsibility and sustainability advisor on luxury and fashion industry. So is currently advising Maison Alia, Chloe and Trussardi, amongst others. And so my question to you, Caterina, is really referring to this. So you've been working with a large fashion house, integrating artisanal production. What have you learned and what have they learned in that process? Oh, Caterina, you're on mute.
Is it working now? I think now it's okay, right? You hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, indeed. I've been working many years in development aid, and the switch to become a social entrepreneur 10 years ago, because I had this idea, which was more of a dream. I thought that it wouldn't be long before hopefully fashion and the fair trade movement would meet. I had forecasted 10 years, and COVID, if there is any good things coming from that, has accelerated it. An existing trend, also we heard before that the past year has somehow raised more awareness. So indeed, many more fashion houses are starting to ask themselves, how could we improve our supply chain? And my dream of having artisans and the fair trade artisans, fair trade verified enterprises be structurally part of the supply chain, is coming to a reality, slowly, but it is. As I said, we had been working, my company, the fair trade company I built 10 years ago was starting from the 10 principle of fair trade. We used it as a canvas to draw everything that we are doing right now. We make jewelry, and our jewelry are made by survivors of violence. But the interesting part is that I've always tried to work with those fashion houses. And the first thing, when you ask me what is that you have been learning in these years, the first thing that I actually realized is that the fashion houses, no matter how good intention they may be, they have their own language. They have their own process and their own priorities and timeline. And that word does not really talk to the world of artisanal, small-scale, fair trade artisans. So the real challenge for me was how to bridge those two words and how to create a common language, and jointly making sure that the supply chain would also see a structurally more elevated role for craftsmanship and social-based craftsmanship. It has not been easy, if you ask me. It has been a long journey. The most recent collaboration we had was with Chloe. Chloe had that. This is one of the pieces we developed. They wait for having by 2023 over 30% of their products made by fair trade certified producer, and they have a partnership with the World Fair Trade Organization. This journey of speaking the same language and bridging the two words has to overcome still a lot of structural problems. The first one being a different conception of what quality means, what compliance means. One of the being a social entrepreneur, I had to be critical with myself first. So when I'm working with luxury houses, the idea of almost good is good enough should not apply at all. So what we thought was a good quality standard, well, we had to, see that again. And that was really a change of attitude from all of us, from my artisans up to myself, to really become aware of certain procedural standards that are different. Eventually, what I think was the main lesson from them was that design, the conception of an object, is the main step, is the first step, and it's what dictates also the circularity of what we are putting again on the market, or putting on the market for the first time. So the design was for us the point we worked mostly with them, and try to have the design studio in Paris, Milan, or wherever they are, try them to understand how they could, first of all, understand what an artisan can do and bring forward the craftsmanship. We have seen beautiful examples from Ethiopia, the hand-looming crafts. We have seen incredible products from Latin America and from Malaysia. Well, the ability to elevate a product that is based on craft and bringing forward the craft, well, that is an added value that is both beneficial for the artisans and for the luxury house. So when the quality are up to standard, and when the designer understand how to bring that extra crafts into the picture, and starting from what we can do instead of what they want us to design, well, that's a magic combination that brought us to develop for the first time a fair trade certified collection in the luxury industry. But as I said, it has not been easy, and it's certainly not over the journey.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. No, and I think but it's opening the door for many more brands and many more artisanal production for greater collaboration. Is that right?
Oh, yes, definitely. And I hope that, I mean, that we could join forces, and, if I may say so, take away a stereotype that unfortunately still now goes around with fair trade, which is far too often associated with not very contemporary design, a bit of old generation product, and unfortunately not too much fashion forward. Well, I hope that together we can break that stereotype and show the world that fair trade artisans, fair trade crafts is up to standard and can be fashion forward, and bring into the market products that are not just meaningful for the artisans, but also beautiful for the final customer.
Thank you, Caterina. And I think actually you've just made a fantastic introduction to Lisa, who's going to talk to us next, who comes from FOLKDAYS in Berlin. And Lisa started FOLKDAYS 8 years ago to transform the image of fair trade in Germany. So before she started the company, she worked for Oxfam, for a public sector consultancy, and Lisa studied political sciences and development economics at Freie University Berlin and the London School of Economics. And she is also an author of the book Starting a Revolution. So a co-authored the book, sorry, and she initiated the petition Fair by Law to change or encourage the German government to pass a supply chain law that gained greater public support during the last 3 years. But going back to this point around transforming the image of fair trade in Germany, just as Caterina was suggesting, I'm going to ask you, Lisa. So in this world of fast fashion, artisanal production may seem niche or irrelevant or old-fashioned. Is this true?
I think it's very much based on the perception and the standpoint you are trying to judge from. So I think it's a very Western-centric view to show it like that. And I do think that there are certain arguments to be made about how the fast fashion scene is actually not very modern, and also might not be super relevant in the future. I'm hoping that in a couple of years we will look back at the way of we have been producing and consuming right now, and probably will be on the one hand embarrassed, and also on the other hand astonished of how old school and how very unforward thinking the ways we are producing right now were. So I think that's like the elements I find most backward, I would say, about fast fashion is, for once, definitely the topic of exploitation and building on a neo-colonialistic system. That means that we are using producers in the global south, pay them very little, and make them produce for the European market. And most of the value added actually happens here. So I think that increases the international inequalities, which destabilizes a lot of political systems, as we know right now. So I think there's a lot of things backwards about that. I think the topic of overproduction, overconsumption, waste is a huge topic. I mean, we all know that we, especially in the global north, are consuming way too much. About a third of the clothes that are in our wardrobes are not even used anymore. And the quality has gone down so much that we are throwing away many of the things that we've only worn once or twice and have to buy new things. So I think that's an element that is so unbelievably backward that I think at one point we probably have to laugh about it. And I think another topic is definitely the fibers that we're using, that many of them are now made out of fossil fuels, which is also, I would say, not a very future, looking into the future way of producing textiles. And it's, it will definitely become problematic. I think the reasons why I would see the way artisans produced in many aspects a lot more forward thinking is one of the core elements that I find so interesting about artisanal production is that actually a big amount of the value added is shifted to the global south. So it's not that, you know, things are produced super cheaply and then the main margin and the main money is made here, but actually a pretty big element of the overall costs stay in the global south, which I find very, very intriguing, and also something that can lead to a lot more equality if it's scaled up a lot more. I think the element of it is at the very core of every piece that's being made. It's not only one production step, but the whole of the product that is made by a person. And I mean, many of the artisans we work with, they use natural materials that have been around for centuries. So I think that's also an element that's so much more sustainable and so much more forward thinking than most of the fast fashion production we are witnessing right now.
Wonderful. Oops. Yeah. No. And do you see consumers changing to adopting more diversity? Do you see this actually in your customers? And that and do you see more diversity happening in fashion consumption, or does artisanal producer need to change their production?
I mean, I think it depends a little bit. I mean, I think I'm working with a lot of artisanal companies that are, I'd say, like second generation, or I mean, like young people who are very, you know, very professional, very fast, also in response, not necessarily in production, but that's something that just comes along with how the things are made. I think it has a lot to do with what we think, like, is the fashion industry as it works right now, is that the ideal we want to, you know, kind of move towards, or is it something totally different? And I personally think that the problems of the fast fashion world are so giant that there's no need to include artisans in that system, because that system is entirely broken. And so I feel like we need to build a new one. And I think that I would wish that artisanal production can be a driving force, especially for small labels. There are a lot of small designers I know that have not giant production capacities, that don't have, you know, huge collections, and they want to, you know, they want to do like small productions. And I think working with artisans makes a lot of sense for them, because, you know, then they have something that is actually making them very special, because being a small designer and producing the same factories as everybody else, it's not going to be interesting. And I think it has been mentioned earlier here that the USP is super important. So the products that we at FOLKDAYS sell to our customers, they are actually unique. So every single piece is super beautiful. It's handmade, it's hand woven, it's hand embroidered. And Amalia, if you don't mind, you could maybe show the first slide of the presentation, because yeah, so it's just a like snapshot of, so every piece we sell is like either made on the hand knitting machine, it's hand printed, it's hand woven. And Amalia, maybe the next slide shows a little bit the, yeah, so it's just a little kind of snapshot of the people we're working with. And I think it's just, yeah, I mean, having a piece that actually is unique and there's not another piece in the world that's exactly the same. I think that's something that our customers love about our products, and they never buy it because they feel bad about buying anything else, but they actually know that if they buy with FOLKDAYS, they will, you know, get something that is basically unique. So I think shifting towards a discourse that is more about the strength and the uniqueness and not about, you know, imperfections, which I find very intriguing, because it actually shows that a human being was involved in the process. I think that's important too.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. And you talk about not engaging artisans in the system, but changing the system. And Fashion Revolution Germany is hard on the track of doing that. And have you been in collaboration with them?
Yeah.
I think
there's a word Stammtisch. We're meeting regularly. So we are in touch. We are talking a lot. I mean, the scene isn't super big in Berlin, and we are planning stuff together. I mean, they've been supporting Fair by Law for a long time, and yeah, we're all friends, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I think we're all part of the same revolution. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. And so I think for anybody who we're going to go over to Erinch now. So Erinch leads the World Fair Trade Organization, the global community of social enterprises fully practicing fair trade. Erinch has worked across business, government, and civil society before joining WFTO and writes lectures and podcasts about social enterprise as the future of business. So, Erinch, I'm going to ask you, what is a fair trade enterprise?
Well, luckily for me, Christine, you've just actually heard from 5 fair trade enterprises. FHMM, Sabahar, CRC, Earth, Air, and SeeMe are all verified by the World Fair Trade Organization as being fair trade enterprises. And I think you heard a whole bunch of things. We heard about, you know, the dignity and the livelihoods of producers, of workers, of artisans, of farmers. We heard about refugees making products. We heard about natural fibers. We heard about upcycling. We heard about all these amazing community embedded and fully committed enterprises. Well, the magic behind that, what is making all these amazing things happen, is a bit of a triangulation. What we're seeing is a combination of artisanal production that is supported by a social enterprise that is fully practicing the 10 principles of fair trade. And that triangulation is I think, a little bit of a magic formula that is allowing us to meet a whole range of challenges across our model of business and of trade. What's also coming out of this is, if you look at the great challenges we are facing as humanity, we're facing basically planetary boundaries that we are overshooting. We are going way beyond the carrying capacity of our planet in the way that our economy is functioning. And I think the whole world is waking up to this fact. Yet, we'll soon have 10 billion people on this earth. And we're going to need to provide livelihoods that support a dignified life for 10 billion people. That means that for every product that is being created, we're going to have to maximize the livelihoods of the people that are making those products. And the fair trade plus social enterprise plus artisanal production model, that triangulation, is the best formula there is for that. Because for every tiny bit of product that is coming out of that chain, what you're getting is a maximum benefit for people who otherwise are completely marginalized. We're seeing that actually across food and across fashion and homewares. So yeah, you saw a bit of a snapshot of some of the scenes. Actually, that photo at the top is from Sabahar, which we connected to earlier. But earlier in the week, we also had a broadcast with Zolta Chocolate as well. And that's certainly coming through from both sides of it. Thank you, Emily. You can take off the slides now. But I think what we're seeing in that triangulation is a completely different paradigm of why business exists. If you build the business from the ground up, to be committed to your local community, to be committed to your suppliers, to be committed to the artisans, workers, and farmers who are making these products, then you stick with them through thick and thin. And we saw that over the last 12, 14 months as the pandemic hit. While mainstream fast fashion brands were slashing orders, putting pressure on their producers and their suppliers to cut costs, and doing everything they could to pass on the risks and the costs of the pandemic, what we saw is 92% of fair trade enterprises were providing additional flexibility to their suppliers, whether that's the brands and wholesalers in Europe, North America, and the developed world, or it's the producing social enterprise, fair trade enterprises in the global south, who are remaining committed to their artisan groups, to their producer groups, to those villages where the production is happening, to their own workers in their factories and their workshops. And that sort of stark contrast, I think, was a real litmus test that showed that what a fair trade enterprise is that through thick and thin, through good times and through bad, you remain completely committed to your mission, and you end up solving a whole range of issues like refugee livelihoods, natural fiber production, upcycling, recycling, livelihoods for people that otherwise would miss out. And the last thing I would say is, across our community of fair trade enterprises that are spread across the world, across 82 countries now, actually, and we're continuing to expand, what we're finding is that they are doing business often with communities and in places that regular businesses aren't bothering with. They're going to places where if you looked at it on the back of an envelope, or you did a spreadsheet calculation of the return on investment, it wouldn't be worth it. And people aren't going to those communities who are producing beyond the Maoist conflict in Nepal. They're not going to the refugee camps or the slums and creating the kind of livelihoods that fair trade enterprises are doing. But essentially what they're doing is doing the heavy lifting of sustainable development. And that's the big solution, I think, of our time that we can all embrace. And it's amazing to see the fashion industry start to realize the potential of this amazing combination of fair trade, social enterprise, and artisanal production.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Erinch, I think quite a lot of the people who have been listening to this today are designers and fashion brands who'd like to know about more how to contact producers and suppliers, and how do they do that? How do people find out how to make these connections?
Well, a few very simple ways. One is go to wfto.com, where you can do a product search. So depending on what you're looking for, on the top right, there's an option to source fair trade, and you do a search and you find organizations, social enterprises that are fully verified by the World Fair Trade Organization, like the 5 that you've met here in this broadcast. And of course, through our social media and through various events, we profile various organizations. But to really find those that you can trust, that you know these guys are completely complying with the 10 principles of fair trade. They exist for this purpose, and they know how to work with these artisanal producers in the most inclusive and effective way. Go to wfto.com. And the last sort of thing I would underline, really, Christine, is that what we found when we did some research that resulted in a report we launched at the beginning of last year. And what we found was that fair trade enterprises were 4 times more resilient than the average SME, than the average small, medium enterprise. It's not because they're making more money. It's because they are more persistent, they persevere, they don't fold and asset strip when times get tough. They remain committed to their communities and their producers. So if you're looking for a supplier who's going to be there through thick and thin, who's going to remain committed and remain reliable, then this community of fair trade enterprises is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much. Yes, and so you can, on this search engine on the WFTO site, you can actually put in materials in there and find out who makes cotton, who's using different materials in there as well. So
exactly. Yep.
Okay, great, wonderful, wonderful. So let's try and get everybody connected so that we have these more sustainable artisanal production and the designers and brands that want to work together in collaboration, changing the world together. So we've got a couple of questions. Thank you everyone for talking so quickly. One of the questions is about replacing materials. Somebody in the chat has suggested that we should be replacing cotton with hemp and bamboo. And I was just wondering, is this really a practical suggestion? Is this something anyone's looked at? I mean, maybe Indro, is that something that you can come back to us on?
Sure. Yes, it is possible. You know, we have looked at several different types of yarn. For example, yarn with bamboo, yarn made with hemp, yarn made with a mix of jute and cotton. So yes, different fabrics are possible, and in fact we are experimenting, and a lot of buyers are in fact wanting various different types of materials. For example, this last one I mentioned, jute and cotton, it's called juco. You know, that's been flying off the shelves, and buyers really appreciate the sustainability, the look and the feel. You know, as Caterina explained, that the product has to look beautiful. So that's the key, that you know you can look at all these different types of materials, but it has to suit the product. You know, it must fit the product which you're making, and it must look beautiful. The other thing we have to be very careful about, you know, there's a lot of misinformation out there, right? For example, you must have heard in the marketplace things like alternative material like vegan leather, right? Now, you know, people go, ooh, vegan leather, but actually if you read the label, you'll find that most of it is like 10% or less of some kind of vegan material, and the rest is just traditional, mainstream, harmful PVC, you know, or, you know, it's just plastic. So you have to be very careful when you're looking at all these alternative materials and on what is a genuine alternative material.
Yes, I think there's a comment in the chat here which says, why replace cotton? And I think that's also, but you're almost answering that question in itself, because I think in many times that we do have to look carefully before replacing cotton.
Correct.
So thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's another question here, which is Artisanal also cruelty-free? Thanks. I was wondering, Hiwot in Sabahar, if you would you like to say, is it your production cruelty-free in your workshop?
Christine, I can jump in quickly on this.
Go on, yes, go on.
Just to say, I mean, what we verify, what these artisanal fair trade producers are, is essentially completely mission-led models of business. So they're not set up to extract maximum profits. They're not looking for ways to cut corners to reduce costs and increase margins. And that obviously applies often to a whole range of ethical issues. So we don't verify specifically this, but what you're getting is a completely different DNA of an enterprise that is built from the ground up to follow a social mission. And that social mission includes being embedded in the community, looking after the local ecosystem on which that enterprise also relies, and expands to certainly to cruelty-free issues as well. And we certainly see that across our community.
Wonderful, wonderful. There's a question about the 10 principles of fair trade, Erinch. I think that goes to you as well. What are the 10 principles of fair trade?
Absolutely. Well, the 10 principles of fair trade, firstly, they come from the movement. So this isn't, and thank you, Amelia, for showing this. This doesn't come from some sort of a consultancy firm that got some very clever people together and decided to impose something down to producers across the world. It's built by the movement of saying, right, what is it that we share in common in terms of values? And here are the 10. I'm not going to read them all out, but essentially what they, and you can go to wfto.com to find more information about them, but essentially they cut across what the enterprise is set up for in terms of the mission, in terms of the opportunities for disadvantaged, marginalized producers. They look at specific practices that enterprise is doing across its business and across its supply chain. So in terms of the way it's paying, the way it's treating its producers and its workers and its farmers. And they also look at the impacts in terms of the human rights issues, whether it's labor rights, whether it's equality and discrimination issues. They cut across that. So it's a real triangulation of the mission-led business model, the practices that allow the fair trade conditions to exist, and then the actual human rights and social impacts that we're measuring. And critically, it includes Principle 10, which is respect for the environment, which goes hand in hand with the kind of social issues that we're talking about today as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. There's a question for you, Sasi, here, which is in relation to shifting from the traditionally designing countries towards the producing countries. How do we make this happen?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, in a way, it can be, I suppose, a little sensitive if you think about, like colonial movements of design and like, how world economies have grown. But I think that's one of the reasons why I think having local organizations and local champions that are producing locally and designing locally. I mean, and I think for me, when I founded Earth Heir, that was one of the key things that I was, I didn't want to waver from, is having a strong brand in the sense that, even when we were approached by other brands that said, oh, hey, can you do like some OEM white label products for us? And we said no. We said it has to be like your brand X Earth Heir, like, our brand has to be there because we want to be known as a brand that can design and that we're not just producers. We're not just a place for you to produce cheaply, and then like we're not known at all. So I think that's something that I believe more and more organizations in this part of the world or in the traditional producing countries are moving towards building brands and, obviously backing it up with great quality and ethics. So that someone from, another nation might be interested in partnering with you on an equal footing rather than just looking at you as as someone to just make something for them and then they put their brand on it.
Yeah, great. And I think we need to see this change happening. We really do need to see that change happening. And that's something I think also I'd like maybe Caterina could add to that, because I know that in working with some of the big brands that you've been working with, more of the risk has been shared there. But we do want a little bit of time because we want to go back to Shifro at the end to talk about cotton. So Caterina, just maybe you could add a bit here.
Yes, indeed. It is a very good point that has been raised. And at the beginning, we have been working as white label for other brands. Actually, we have accepted to do it because we simply needed the job. We needed the work. We wanted to hire more people. But more, I have to say that there's a shift, thankfully, right now, not just in designing, as I said, bringing forward what we can do, but also in showcases our story. And the latest collaboration we have done, they have literally put our name on each and every box that went out. They broadcasted on their social media the faces and the work we do in the workshop, and they, most importantly, told our story. So they brought us forward in a huge market. This was a visibility that I think that we all need to be there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. I know I see Shifra has come back from the workshop in Sabahar.
Andy.
So while we have the opportunity,
Okay.
we're going to talk about cotton.
Okay. Yeah, there is a question on cotton. So I think the processing of cotton is the best in Ethiopia. Even the cotton is available. When you read the issue of hemp, I think hemp, in terms of government, also it's not allowed in Ethiopia. At the same time, I know bamboo. We are using the bamboo on the furniture, but to change bamboo to the fiber, it needs a big process. I think it needs more process. No, it's not started still in Ethiopia. So for that purpose, still we are using cotton, and alternatively we are using a silk. So that's the easy one. But in the future, we have, as a government, we have a plan to work on bamboo. But bamboo fiber is more takes time to process.
Okay.
That's my comment. Yeah.
Shifra, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And
Okay.
thank you very much indeed. And then great to see that loom working away in the workshop there. And just before we finish, maybe Pedro, you would like to just to say a little bit about the work that you've been doing in the transparency and of marking your materials as well before we go.
Yes, of course. I think that it is important and it's connect directly with how we can shift this view of production countries to design countries to have our own platforms. And in Ensamble Artesano, we are also covering that part. We are collaborating with more than 20 Mexican designers that are working directly with the workshops. And we put the name of each artisans and also each designer, but at the same level in the label of the final product. And the final consumers are able to have that story and to connect directly with the social networks of some artisan groups or directly with the designers. And that is important. We need to establish this more equal power and horizontal relations and conversations at the same level among the whole value chain.
Wonderful. And Lisa, do you have to do you want to add to us here?
I actually checked out all the websites of the the different WFTO members in this talk, and they have all so beautiful designs. I mean, there's nothing to add, to be honest. It's really, I think, it's about time that we don't think that we need to come up with designs that somebody else needs to produce for us, but to actually kind of, see where maybe the more beautiful and more unique designs are being made, and hopefully be able to buy them for our European market. So I think that's a really reasonable and overdue shift.
Thank you. I think that's perfectly summed up. Absolutely perfect. It's a reasonable and very overdue sift. So thank you very, very much for all our participants today. And thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating. I really am very, very grateful for all your contributions. And I'm going to say goodbye from all of us. And yes, buy Lisa's book, buy our products, and join the fashion revolution. Thank you. Goodbye.